Now, one bit of bad news this past week. We talked it last week about Michael Illian signing his contract, potentially coming over as early as next year. We talked, off camera, because it happened when we were in the middle of our break, about the Penguins bringing back Philip Hollander from Europe. This time, they end up losing a prospect, and a prospect is going the other direction. Vasily Ponomarev seems like he's heading to the KHL. His rights in the KHL were traded to Avangard Omsk, and he is expected to head to Russia. The 23-year-old center just finished up his first full season in the Penguins organization. He was initially acquired as part of the Jake Gensel trade back in 2024. He had a solid season at the AHL level, 41 points in 55 games for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, but he only played in 7 games for the NHL Penguins, typically spending time as their fourth line center, although he did have a couple games where he was notched as the third line center for Mike Sullivan's team. Were you as shocked as I was to see this news of Vasily Ponomarev heading the other direction and leaving the Penguins organization? At least that's what is expected to happen. Nothing official has been announced as of this recording.
Yeah, it was a little surprising. I didn't know much of what to make of it. There were some parts of me that weren't totally blown out of the water by it, just because he clearly had a very big projection in Carolina. He had something going for him when he was moved to Pittsburgh as part of the Jake Gensel deal. Uh, you could argue he was the main piece of the return over Koivunen just by sheer fact of age and NHL readiness.
Mm-hmm.
But then obviously you see Ville Koivunen coming in and just blowing Ponomarev out of the water in terms of who's here for the NHL. And then every time Ponomarev did get his chances, it was fourth line, third line. If you look at Daily Faceoff right now, he's on the fourth line behind Una Koppinen. I know the lineup's weird on the website right now just because of free agency and contracts need to be officially signed and whatnot. But even in that situation, being shoved behind someone that was kind of just brought in as a face for, sparse call-ups and to mostly be in the AHL, that doesn't sound good or positive on the mental of a prospect who had a lot going for him. And again, this isn't necessarily, I'm not painting all Russian hockey players in the same brush here, but man, they like going back to Russia. They do. A lot of times they see more benefits to going back home to play than they do staying in the NHL and puttering around the AHL systems whenever there are guaranteed roles in the K that like he could go over and be a star over there. And there's nothing against that. I mean, some of the longest tenured veteran Russian players want to go back and play there. It's just the way it is. They like playing in their home countries, and you can't blame them when overall the KHL is probably the second biggest and best hockey league in the world. So it's a step down, but they feel a lot better at home. They are just as popular over there, I believe. And he's a young kid. I mean, I believe the Penguins might still have his rights if he goes back. It depends
They
on the
will.
situation.
He's an RFA right now, but I would imagine they're going to tender him at least a qualifying offer so they can retain his rights.
Yeah, which would be the correct move, just in the way that they're getting Philip Hollander back. You never know what happens down the line.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a fascinating move. It's a fascinating decision that it makes sense, but it is still a little surprising because he is still, I guess, one of the Penguins' top prospects.
It makes no sense in my eyes, to be completely honest. I mean, the Penguins are explicitly going young in air quotes, whatever you want to call it. But they're going into a rebuild. There's going to be opportunity for younger players. And yes, Vasily Ponomarev probably wanted a little bit more than 7 games played at the NHL level last year. And when he played, you mentioned it was fourth line minutes, most of the time under 10 a game, and not great deployment at that. But this is a guy that you had to have imagined was going to be part of the plan this year, right? He came in and he was one of Dubas's guys in the organization. He probably had a higher standing in the organization than a first round pick in Sam Poulin. I think that is a fair assumption to make. And I thought that he had an opportunity going into this season to fight for a roster spot out of camp. And I think most people would tend to agree with that. So to make the decision to go back to the KHL and to head back over to Russia, I was extremely shocked by this. Now, if a player had done this in Pittsburgh a couple years ago, then yeah, I probably wouldn't blame him, i.e. Philip Hollander. When he did that, I said, all right, well, yeah, it makes sense. Mike Sullivan's the head coach. The team hasn't really shown that they're looking towards a rebuild at all, but now they're almost full on as much as you can be with guys like Crosby, Malkin, and Letang that you're still trying to do justice by. They're as close to a rebuild as they're going to get. They're as all in on a rebuild as they're going to get. And there's people within the organization that are telling reporters that they are going to be as good or bad as their young guys make them next year. If you're Ponomarev, you have to look around and say, oh, that's me. Like they're talking about me. Like, I'm going to get that opportunity. I'm going to be one of the young guys that is going to determine whether or not this team is good or bad at the NHL level. So, and especially with the head coach hiring as well, a guy who is explicitly being brought in to shepherd the youth of the organization. It doesn't make sense to me. And again, I haven't talked to Vasily Ponomarev about this, and his thoughts and opinions and reasoning has not been brought out to the light. And when it is, maybe it'll make more sense. Maybe there's other reasons. You never know what's going on in someone's personal life that could affect his professional choices. But professionally, to me, I was shocked. I was. Now, the one last thing I'll say about this, I've seen very vocal minority, but I've seen some people using this piece of news as another reason to bash the Jake Gensel trade. I have no time for that. You're an absolute idiot if you're bashing the Jake Gensel trade because Vasily Ponomarev is heading back to the KHL. I understand. It stinks because this is one of the guys that you were hoping would make a big impact, and it would be quantity over quality of a 40-goal scorer in Jake Gensel. You'd have a bunch of different players that could play at the NHL level. Well, I don't have time for it because of what's still there. The Jake Gensel trade tree is blossoming and is already huge. You have Ville Koivunen, who looks like a bona fide top 6 guy as early as next season. You have Cruz Lucius, who there's still a lot to be determined. You got Harrison Brunick, who right now it's between him and Owen Pickering for the best defensive prospect in your system, could be ready as early as next season. Then you have to add on everything you got from Michael Bunting, which is Tommy Novak, middle 6 forward for right now, a 2026 second round pick and a 2027 fourth round pick that you got back in exchange for trading Luke Schenn. So if you're using this to bash the Gensel trade, you know absolutely nothing about hockey, and I have no time for you.
It's a heck of a jump. I mean, yeah, you're right. I don't like the idea of people continuing to pull the Jake Gensel trade down because he's leaving. Dude, like you said, we don't know exact reasons why he's planning on going back to Russia. There could be some homesickness involved. We don't know. There could be some. I get he's been in North America for a while, so maybe that's less likely, but you just never know. Like I said, these Russians do just like going back to play in Russia sometimes. And actually, all European players do. We see it quite a lot. I mean, even like I said, even the veterans go back. Tomas Tatar's going back to Europe to play. And he honestly probably could have, he isn't that good anymore, but he probably could have gotten another NHL deal somewhere. I'm sure someone would have paid him to be a cheap depth option. But instead, he's going to go to Europe and be closer to home, play in a different league, get a different level of experience, and just, for Tatar at least, play off into the sunset, close to home. Good for him. As for Ponomarev, go play at home, be closer to family, all of that, and maybe come back. This isn't the end of the road either.
No.
There are options that he could come back, but he could go over there, blossom, play really well. Maybe he turns out to be a really good player over there and wants to stay. And honestly, that's his choice, not yours, not ours, not mine. So I get why it's very surprising, but this team's just in a weird spot that I'm not surprised by anything. I think that could also be it, that I'm just kind of numb to, yeah, no, that's not surprising. Nothing surprises me with this team anymore. Losing prospects makes sense. Gaining prospects also makes sense. It is just a fascinating decision, though, because, like you said, the opportunities were going to be there for him here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and the one thing I want to, before we close out the show with another topic, the one thing I don't want to have happen is people mistake my surprise and my disagreement with the actual decision to be me begrudging the decision and begrudging the player. He's
Right.
going to do what's best for him, and we're always players first on this podcast, so do what's best for you, Vasily. But I'm shocked.
Hmm.
I'm shocked that one could look at the opportunity in front of him in Pittsburgh and be like, I think I'm going to go back to the KHL. But again, we've mentioned it a couple times on this segment. Who knows what the reasoning is?
Hmm.
Who knows the thought process behind it? Who knows what's happening in Vasily Ponomarev's life that helped lead him to that professional decision? So obviously, we wish him all the best. We're hoping
Yes.
that he goes over and absolutely kills it for Avangard Omsk, and we'll be keeping our eyes on Vasily Ponomarev. Who knows? Like you mentioned, we're seeing Philip Hollander come back to North America this year and come back to the Penguins organization. Maybe a couple years down the road, we're seeing the same thing with Vasily Ponomarev.